Who created God? What if the question you've been asking is fundamentally flawed? A paradox that breaks down when examined closely. Imagine a child asking, if everything needs a maker, who made the very first maker? It seems like an impossible loop, an infinite regression with no beginning. And yet, here we are, contemplating our existence and its source. Today, we're diving into perhaps the most challenging theological question of all time. If God created us, who created God? This question has haunted philosophers, theologians, and ordinary people for millennia. It's been used as both a defense against belief and a pathway to deeper understanding. By the end of this journey, you won't just have answers. You'll have a completely new way of thinking about existence itself. Whether you're a believer, an atheist, or somewhere in between, this exploration will challenge your fundamental assumptions about reality. What if I told you that the question itself contains a hidden assumption that might be preventing you from seeing the full picture? That our very human concept of causality might be inadequate when applied to the ultimate questions of existence. Let's begin with a simple thought experiment. Imagine you're standing in front of a mirror that reflects another mirror behind you, creating an infinite corridor of reflections. Each reflection depends on the one before it. But ask yourself, does the first reflection need to have been created by another reflection, or does it simply require something of a different nature? You, standing in front of the mirror? This exploration will take us through ancient wisdom, quantum physics, philosophical reasoning, and the limits of human understanding. We'll examine how different cultures and traditions have wrestled with this question, and what their insights might tell us about the nature of reality itself. Are you ready to question your assumptions about time, causality, and existence? Then let's begin our journey into one of the greatest mysteries of all. The question, who created God, isn't new. It has echoed through history, across cultures, and within every major philosophical tradition. In ancient Greece, Aristotle proposed the concept of the unmoved mover, a prime cause that initiates all movement but is itself unmoved. He reasoned that without such a first cause, we'd face an infinite regression of causes, which he found logically impossible. In Hindu philosophy, particularly in the Upanishads, we find the concept of Brahman, the ultimate, unchanging reality behind all existence. As we explored in our video on Atman, Brahman isn't created, but is rather the ground of all being, beyond time and causation. Chinese philosopher Laozi described the Tao as the source of everything, yet itself sourceless. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The question took on new importance in medieval times. Thomas Aquinas formulated his famous 5 ways to prove God's existence, with the first being the argument from motion. There must be a first mover who is not moved by anything else. Islamic philosophers, like Al-Ghazali and Avicenna, developed the Kalam cosmological argument, which states that everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause, which they identified as God, who, crucially, did not begin to exist. Immanuel Kant argued that human reason inevitably leads to such questions, but lacks the capacity to answer them definitively. He called these antinomies, seemingly unsolvable contradictions that arise when we try to understand the ultimate nature of reality. Bertrand Russell challenged the principle of sufficient reason itself, asking why the universe needs an explanation but God doesn't. He famously responded to the cosmological argument by asking, if everything must have a cause, then God must have a cause. If there can be anything without a cause, it may just as well be the world as God. This brings us to the heart of our question. Is it a fair question to ask, who created God? Or does it misunderstand something fundamental about what we mean by God? Different theological traditions have approached this question in fascinating ways, revealing much about how they conceive of the divine. In classical theism, found in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, God is defined as a necessary being, one that could not fail to exist, and whose existence explains itself. God is not just very old or very powerful, but exists in a fundamentally different way than created things. In Christianity, God is often described as existing outside of time, not just endlessly stretching into the past, but transcending temporal existence altogether. As Augustine of Hippo put it, "It was not in time that God made heaven and earth, for the will of God exists outside time." The Islamic concept of wajib al-wujud, or necessary existence, similarly posits that God's essence is to exist, not something that came into being or could cease to exist. In Judaism, particularly in Kabbalah, God is described as Ein Sof, without end, infinite, beyond all attributes and descriptions. Not a being within reality, but the ground of reality itself. In Advaita Vedanta, Brahman is not a created entity, but the ultimate reality behind all appearances. The question of who created Brahman is like asking what's north of the North Pole. It misunderstands the nature of what's being discussed. Buddhism takes a different approach, often declining to answer metaphysical questions about ultimate origins. The Buddha compared such questions to a man struck by an arrow who refuses treatment until he knows who shot it, what wood the arrow is made from, and so on. The urgent matter is addressing suffering, not speculation about unknowable origins. Taoism views the Tao as the spontaneous, natural way of the universe, not created, but eternally self-generating. As we seek explanations, we move further from this natural state of understanding. Theologian Richard Swinburne argues that asking, who created God, commits a category error. Like asking, who is the bachelor's wife? The question assumes something about the subject that contradicts its definition. If God, by definition, is the uncreated creator, then asking who created God is like asking what color is jealousy. It applies a category inappropriately. But is this just a linguistic trick? Or does it point to something deeper about the nature of existence and our ability to comprehend it? The question opens up profound philosophical challenges about causation, infinity, and the limits of human understanding. One of the strongest philosophical objections to the idea of God as creator comes from the problem of infinite regress. If everything needs a creator, then who created God? And who created that creator? And so on, infinitely. There are three potential solutions to this regress problem. 1. Infinite regress. There is no first cause. Causes extend infinitely backward in time, but can an actual infinity exist in reality? 2. Necessary being. The chain of causation stops at a being that necessarily exists and requires no external explanation. 3. Brute fact. Something, either God or the universe, simply exists without explanation. It's a brute fact that can't be further analyzed. Modern physics has transformed our understanding of time. Einstein's relativity shows that time is not absolute, but relative to reference frames. Quantum mechanics introduces further complications with virtual particles that appear to come into existence without traditional causes. If time itself began with the Big Bang, what meaning does before have? Can causality as we understand it even apply to the origin of the universe? Physicist Stephen Hawking posed this question. What place then for a creator? He suggested that asking what came before the Big Bang is like asking what's south of the South Pole. It's a meaningless question because time itself begins with the universe. Philosophers distinguish between contingent things, those that might not have existed, and necessary things, those that could not fail to exist. Our universe appears contingent. The laws of physics could have been different. But must there be some necessary reality that grounds all contingent existence? Philosopher Gottfried Leibniz asked, "Why is there something rather than nothing?" His principle of sufficient reason states that everything must have an explanation, either in external causes or in its own nature. If God is defined as a necessary being, then God would be self-explaining, existing by the necessity of divine nature, not requiring an external cause. But can we really conceive of a truly necessary being? Or is this beyond human understanding? Modern science offers fascinating perspectives on creation, causality, and the nature of reality itself. The Big Bang Theory suggests the universe had a beginning approximately 13.8 billion years ago. This strengthened theological arguments. If the universe began to exist, doesn't it need a cause? But quantum physics complicates this picture. Quantum fluctuations appear to allow particles to come into existence without traditional causes. Theoretical models like quantum vacuum fluctuations suggest the possibility of universes arising spontaneously. Physicists like Lawrence Krauss argue that nothing in physics isn't really nothing. It's a quantum vacuum with physical properties from which something can emerge. Critics counter that this just shifts the question. Why does this quantum vacuum exist at all? Some cosmologists propose that our universe is just one of many in a vast multiverse. If infinite universes exist with varying properties, perhaps universes that can support life are rare, but inevitable given enough trials. Does this eliminate the need for a creator? Not necessarily, as philosopher William Lane Craig argues. The multiverse itself would require an explanation. You've just increased the size of the creation, not eliminated the need for a creator. Systems theory reveals how complex structures can emerge from simple rules without a designer. From Conway's Game of Life to neural networks, we see how complexity can arise from simplicity. Could the universe itself be an emergent phenomenon? If so, what fundamental reality gives rise to it? Recent theories in quantum gravity suggest that space-time itself might be emergent from deeper quantum structures. Networks of relationships more fundamental than space or time as we know them. In such models, asking what caused or created the universe might be like asking what's north of the North Pole, applying concepts that don't make sense at that level of reality. Why do we ask this question at all? The answer may lie in the structure of our minds and our existential need for meaning. Our brains evolved to understand causality in the middle world of human experience, not the quantum realm or cosmic scales, where pattern-seeking creatures wired to look for agency behind events. Cognitive scientists like Pascal Boyer suggest that belief in creator beings may be a natural extension of our agency detection abilities. Skills that helped our ancestors identify predators but may over-trigger, seeing agency where there is none. But this doesn't mean God doesn't exist. Only that we're naturally inclined to think in terms of creators and creation. Existential psychologists note that humans uniquely seek not just immediate explanations but ultimate meaning. As Viktor Frankl observed, we need not just to survive but to find purpose. The question, who created God, reflects this deeper search for ultimate grounding. Some final answer that provides absolute certainty. But what if certainty itself is an illusion? What if mystery is not a temporary state of ignorance but an essential feature of reality? As physicist Richard Feynman said, "I think it's much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers that might be wrong." Our language evolved to describe everyday experiences, not ultimate reality. When we speak of God creating, we're using metaphorical extensions of human activities. Philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein suggested that many philosophical problems arise from misuses of language, applying terms outside their proper domain. Eastern traditions often emphasize this limitation. The Tao Te Ching begins, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao." In Buddhist traditions, ultimate reality is often approached through negation, describing what it is not rather than what it is. Perhaps our question itself needs to be transcended, not answered. After exploring theological, philosophical, scientific, and psychological perspectives, what insights can we draw? Perhaps our question assumes a linear, temporal model of causation that doesn't apply to ultimate reality. What if divine creation is not an event in time but a timeless, ongoing relationship? As theologian Keith Ward suggests, God's creation might be better understood, not as a past event but as the ongoing grounding of reality. Like a singer sustaining a note, rather than a watchmaker who builds and walks away. Every explanation system, whether scientific or theological, eventually reaches foundational assumptions that cannot be further explained within the system. Science has its fundamental constants and laws. Mathematics has its axioms. Philosophy has its first principles. Perhaps the question, "Who created God?" reveals not a flaw in theological thinking, but a universal feature of human understanding. We always reach a point where explanation must give way to acceptance of mystery. What if, instead of asking, "Who created God?" we ask, "What would it mean for something to exist necessarily rather than contingently?" Can we conceive of existence itself as fundamental rather than derived? What if we're applying time-bound concepts to a timeless reality? As Einstein noted, "The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is comprehensible." The very fact that we can understand anything about reality is itself profound. We've journeyed through ancient wisdom, modern science, philosophical reasoning, and psychological insights, all to explore one seemingly simple question. If God created us, who created God? What we've discovered is that this question, while natural to ask, may ultimately dissolve when we examine its assumptions closely. It applies time-bound, human concepts of causation to what theologians describe as timeless, necessary existence. Whether you believe in God or not, this exploration reveals something profound about the nature of existence and the limits of human understanding. At the foundation of every worldview, theistic, atheistic, or agnostic, lies mystery and wonder. Perhaps the most honest approach is to acknowledge both our desire for ultimate explanations and the possibility that some questions transform us more by being contemplated than by being answered. As the physicist Werner Heisenberg wrote, "The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you." Or perhaps, as in many Eastern traditions, the ultimate reality transcends all our categories, neither created nor uncreated, neither being nor non-being, but the ground in which all such distinctions arise. What's your perspective on this ancient question? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this exploration valuable, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest questions of existence. Until next time, keep questioning, Keep wondering, and remember, sometimes the greatest wisdom lies not in finding the final answer, but in learning to live meaningfully with the question. Thank you for joining me on this profound journey. If you enjoyed this exploration, please like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Hit the notification bell for more philosophical deep dives. What question would you like me to explore next? Let me know below.